And with that, I will turn it over to Nolan. Nolan, if you could unmute.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that everyone, can you hear me? Am I perfect? Perfect. So first, let me thank Connecting the Dots for the work that they have been doing long before I was asked to be here, and the way that they've been thinking about knitting together humanity through words, through actions, and most importantly, through an honest and open dialogue. And more specifically, Melanie, I want to thank you for the invitation and really sitting at the tip of the spear on this and the work. So what I want to do is I want to speak to you all like I generally speak to good friends of mine, and friends of mine know that when you're having a conversation with me, you're having a conversation that's either a transactional conversation or an emotional conversation. Because if I mix the two, we tend to get confused about what's happening. So what I want to do is I want to have a very transactional conversation with you. So which means that this conversation is going to be devoid of the emotion that tends to pull us by our heartstrings and pull us by our souls to a place where it is very interesting and it is important for us to have that conversation, but that's not the conversation that we're having right now. So if I offend anyone's period sensibilities, or if I offend their kind of patronizing perspectives on social justice, I do apologize, but I've told you up front that we are having a transactional conversation because I do think the transaction of social justice is the most important part of the conversation that has been missing in the lexicon of life at this point. So the question, why is economic justice a prerequisite to social justice, I think is an important one, right? And when you look at the term or the word social justice, at the very beginning of this of the definition is a focus on the distribution of wealth, the distribution of opportunity and privilege. When you look at the definition of social justice, it's the distribution of wealth, opportunity, and privilege. Nowhere did you hear or see in that definition anyone say that it's how someone feels. Nowhere was it about how we legislate something called morality, because we've been trying to legislate morality since the beginning of time, and it just has not worked. Social justice at its very core is the opportunity for real wealth, resources, and privilege. None of those things are emotionally charged. All of those things are very much this is how we get there. So when we think about advocacy at this point, we're really having these conversations about advocacy in a moralistic way, in a way where we're trying to legislate a morality that we have been unsuccessful at legislating since the beginning of time. You can't legislate the way that a person feels about you. But what you can do is legislate how resources are flowing into opportunities, which are flowing into the privilege that every American and every person around the world should actually have. You can legislate that. But far too often we wind up having these conversations about justice and about advocacy in a way that's very personalized, that's very emotional, that's less about what the goal is and more about how people feel. Now, again, I do not mean to offend anyone's sense, anyone's sensibilities, anyone's prejudgment on what a conversation like this should look like. I told you in the beginning, we're having a transactional conversation about how we get to where we're going as opposed to where we've been, because that's not going to get us to where we're going. So when I think about how we look at societies, societies are built on exchange, and exchange is built on value. So if our society is built on exchange and exchange is built on value, that means that whatever it is that you need, that you have in a society, it's going to have to be of value, and someone's going to have to want it so that the exchange actually makes sense. But what happens when you begin in a society who we know where opportunity, wealth, and privilege are the core of what makes up society, of what makes a social contract up? Again, society and social are very synonymous when we're talking about building humanity. So in a country like ours, which I fundamentally believe is a wonderful country, when we build from an institutional place where we think about value, and then we look at where we are right now, the real question that I would posit to us is, did we build our society on solid foundation for everyone. So here's how I would walk through the value proposition. So our country starts very, very long time ago, and it starts on the back of resource, wealth. It starts on the back of slavery. It starts on the back of a valuable group of people who are bringing value to a community or to a country that's being started. That value in exchange is being then sold, whether it be planting, whether it be harvesting, that value is being sold to others because they want something in exchange. So it's money in exchange for tobacco, it's money in exchange for cotton. So again, it's value and it's exchange, how society starts. But what happens when a society begins to try to make a conscious decision that that value proposition that you were founded on is completely wrong and is not the way to build a country? You upset the value proposition, you upset the exchange notion of about where we started. So you go from slavery, and then you go to things like where we're getting to the Freedmen's Bureau and we're getting to Reconstruction. Again, what the Freedmen's Bureau was about was taking wealth, was taking opportunity and privilege and providing something called 40 acres and a mule to folks who did not have those things before. Again, value. 40 acres of land and a mule to tend that land. What we can't do is we can't pretend that our country was built on something that it wasn't. Our country is built on exchange and value. So the first thing that the country said that we're going to give to these newly freed Africans is land and a way to till the land with a mule. So what should that say to the onlooker? What that should say to the onlooker is that the true value is in things that are of value to a larger community. So the value in the individual has now been taken away because slavery is abolished. The country is now telling us what value is. Land is value, 40 acres and a mule. The country is also saying we're going into Reconstruction. We're going to ensure that other people have an opportunity to be elected by the people, for the people. These individuals will be elected. So what happens with the Freedmen Bureau? No 40 acres and a mule. Because the reality actually hit, wait a minute, we are literally about to redistribute opportunity, wealth, and privilege. And we are literally about to distribute the opportunity to vote. Because if you were a landowner, you could vote. Reconstruction. So that's why you wind up having people around the country who were African, newly freed Africans who were actually running for Congress, who actually were representing their folks. Again, the next value proposition is then the realization that these people who are now elected officials can now decide how money in America is spent, where those resources will go. Again, value. We're not talking about legislating morality. We're not talking about legislating that the country would love or people would love the people who are there. We're talking about how do we move resources in a way that is going to be more fair and more equitable. Well, what did we decide to do? We decided to do away with Reconstruction. So again, slavery, Freedmen's Bureau, Reconstruction, we do away with all of those things. Why? Because the value was being transferred in a way that it's no longer under the control of a very few. So when we're having this conversation about social justice, we have got to be intellectually honest about where social started. It's in civil society and it's in an exchange for things. It's an exchange for things. And let's also be intellectually honest. When I say exchange for things, I'm not overlooking the exchange for things that were people 3/5 compromise. Because our country looked at those people as things also. So we're all adults around the table. We're trying to get to a more perfect union. And if we're going to get there, we can't pretend that our history isn't what it is so that we can build a better future. So again, exchange for value. We bring ourselves through slavery. We bring ourselves through the Freedmen's Bureau. We bring ourselves through Reconstruction. We're still in a place where we haven't made a conscious decision that everyone in civil society should be socially equal. Social justice, again, wealth, opportunity, privilege. It's not, do you like me? It's not, do I like you? It's how value is exchanged again. So if we even just fast forward, we have things like the Black codes. We have things like where we're ensuring that there's going to be less of a distribution of opportunity because the vote is being ensured to not exist for everyone. Land ownership is being ensured not to exist for everyone. So we fast forward again, and I'm conscious of time. I want to make sure that I get this and I do it properly. So we fast forward into the New Deal. We're talking 1933. Stock market crashes, the country is upside down. Now, slavery, Freedmen's Bureau, Reconstruction, all of that gets taken away. You still have a complete underclass that when the rest of the country catches a cold, that underclass literally dies. So we hit the Depression. And what the Depression does is we create this New Deal and we're saying, my God, we have got to make sure that American society is taken care of because we have so many people who are out of work. We have so many people who are starving. We need to do this. But the truth is the we wasn't a we that was an inclusive we of all Americans who were here. So we have the New Deal. And did it lift some boats? Absolutely it did, but there was no trickle down. Didn't happen then, couldn't happen now, won't happen ever. So there were boats that were lifted during the New Deal, no question. We fast forward a little more and we bring ourselves to things like the GI Bill, right? So now we're really thinking about how do we legislate policy where we're strengthening Americans in a way where those Americans have the resources, they have the wealth, they have the privilege and the opportunity to put back into the economy. So we got really good at legislating how money is moved. So we created the GI Bill. Again, a wonderful opportunity to create an immense opportunity for people who have fought for this country, fought for the ideals. But again, disproportionately, those same people who went through, their lineage went through slavery, Reconstruction, the Freedmen's Bureau, still left completely behind. So even just pausing right there, is there any wonder that today, when we're having these conversations about social justice, that we're less having a conversation about the movement of resources and we're more having the conversation about the feeling? Let's be intellectually honest about this. Black folks in this country resigned themselves to creating Negro spirituals that basically said, soon I will be done with the trouble of the world. I'm going home to live with God. There's going to be a better place for me than this place. Soon I will be done with the troubles of the world because I'm going home to live with God. Just hold on to that for a minute. Let that sink in. That a people so connected to their past that they're singing for the afterlife because they know there will be no equality and there will be no opportunity in this life. Because we weren't trying and we weren't looking at the morality of things. We were looking at the resource development and the resource movement. You fast forward all the way to now. So we, of course, civil rights movement, all of those wonderful things happen. We have the opportunity to vote unlike we've had before. We've had the opportunity to go to the schools unlike we've had before. We've had the opportunity to actually purchase the things that we've never been able to purchase before. The question is to what end? What did our schools during that time look like, right? Brown versus Board of Education, separate but equal. So we're really, listen, if we spend any time and Miss Marie, our educator in the room who was the teacher, an English teacher, I know that you know these things. I know that they are right at the tip of your tongue and at your mind. But I think the important thing is if we're watching how our country has actually moved and how it's positioned itself, it continues to understand what value looks like. it continues to understand what the market and exchange for goods look like, but it also continues to actually hold it in a very interesting way that makes its accessibility very tough and very challenging for people who have come from the places where lots of people who are here have come from. So we have civil rights movement. We can eat at any lunch counter that we want to. The question is, can we afford to, and or who actually owns the lunch counter and the restaurant? We can go to any school that we want to. What reason do we go to a school with subpar books, hand-me-down books, and a school building that's actually falling down? What real education can come to our children from there? Again, value. But what shouldn't be missed is the value that those Americans actually have for the larger America. Because value that is value, that's a very valuable thing, you pay for. Value that is of little value, you ignore. So, education, ignored. Job opportunities, ignored. Businesses, ignored, right? So again, I'm having a transactional conversation about a very true space and place that we have to be really honest about when we're thinking about talking about social justice. So we wind up going through the civil rights movement. Brilliant, love it. We stand on the shoulders of kings and queens who did amazing work for us. We fast forward to things that are happening now. So some of you may remember new market tax credits. Some of you have heard about opportunity zones that are happening now, empowerment zones. All of these legislative moves to channel resources, and these resources would then be said to go to communities that are most in need. I would challenge us to think about any of those tax programs that I just said, that the impact was to turn around the communities that we're talking about. One, and the opportunity for those who lived in those communities to take advantage of those tax benefits and or incentives from the government. When you go in your breakout rooms, I challenge everyone to pull it out for me. Here is one that I will give you. So, because I am an inquisitive child, I am both my mother's and my grandfather's child, I wanted to know how things like tax policy make a difference in communities. And why was it that taxing was such a hot button topic around the country? When do we ever ask? Well, here's why. With a new market tax credit program, it's a program essentially where if you put money into these underrepresented or areas that are actually going down, you get tax benefits, you get to write off capital gains, the list goes on and on. But the question is, who has access to be able to use that? Not many at all. Now, what I had a beautiful opportunity to do, and again, I'm a simple builder. I just love to build and break things and then build them again. But what we did was, we said, you know what? We are going to take advantage of new market tax credits. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a new market tax credit deal and build a community development city in the upper 9th Ward of New Orleans post-Katrina for a few reasons. One, to show that people who weren't of value over time understood how to use a value proposition for other people who still aren't of 100% value. But what it also did was it took an organization like the Urban League in New Orleans and put us square in the middle of a political battle of, are we going to rebuild the 9th Ward? And what we said is, we will be damned if you don't, and we are going to double down and build a facility. Now, what are we going to do? Again, using tax policy to build a facility for people who were supposed to be forgotten. And what we also did was we built that facility in between two streets, agriculture and industry. Literally, the building is between agriculture and industry. Agriculture from where we came an industry at that time for where we were going. And these folks in the Desire community in New Orleans in the Ninth Ward were the bridge from one kind of economy to the next kind. Very intentional to keep a lesson out there, but also to force our city's government into being clear that we were not going to let you have you do what you're supposed to do in terms of tax policy and getting money back to our communities. But how many of us were able to do that? We fast forward right now to opportunity zones. Again, another really interesting opportunity. But right now, what's happening with opportunity zones, where again, the thought was rebuilding downtrodden communities, helping businesses to locate there and relocate, and actually giving them investing dollars in their businesses to start them up. What has it turned into? It's turned into a real estate play. So opportunity zones are being used to build malls. Opportunity zones are being used to build other buildings. They're not being used to do what they were originally said to do. So opportunity zones like new market tax credits, like empowerment zones, again, understanding value, understanding exchange, but not understanding how to use the legislative mechanisms to bring that value into communities. And the last thing that I would leave you with is just this. I have no interest in someone legislating morality to like me. I have every interest in this country ensuring that opportunity for those who are willing to roll their sleeves up and work hard is available. We don't have to, and again, I'm having a transactional conversation. All of my emotional people who I'm saying I don't need you to like me, please, we're having a transactional conversation. We don't need you to like. We need you to see. If we are in fact a member of this humanity, all of us, then I need you to see me and people who look like me and people who don't look like me, and all of us as one. But the only way that we do that is if we think about this in the way that societies are started. Societies, again, are started on exchange for value. So until there's real value in the communities that I'm talking about, there will never be an exchange because there's no one who's actually seeing the value. And I think that's the beauty of connecting the dots. It's the beauty of the work that you're doing right now, because what's really important is that we talk about what real value is. So if we are having a social justice conversation, a social justice conversation is inextricably linked to a civil rights conversation, which is inextricably linked to a civil society conversation. And a civil society is one that provides opportunity for everyone. Thank you.